Buzz on Business.
This week on the Buzz on Business, we have the former president of OSU, Burns Hargis, with us. And whether you are listening on your walk to class, drive to work, or a quick break in the day, we bring industry professionals, Spears alumni, faculty and students, and notable Cowboys right to you. This is the Buzz on Business.
Mr. Ex-President?
I prefer former.
I guess that does probably sound a little
X
better.
kind of sounds like you're gone.
That's right. Ex sound like we got divorced.
Literally.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's wonderful to have you. We haven't
great to
spoken
be
in a
here.
while. We're delighted you're taking the time to be with us.
Of course. This is home. I love it up here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. So, how's retirement?
Well, it's a little busier than I intended it to be, but it's an adjustment. It's after working for 60 years, it's kind of an adjustment. But I still chair our Leadership Institute here, and still has our pet therapy program, and we both have offices over at the Student Union. So we're here some, but I've actually gone back to my old law firm as of counsel. They tried to coach me up on this electronic timekeeping system, and I said I won't be needing that. I don't intend to be keeping any time. I haven't practiced law since 1997. I'm not competent. It'd be malpractice to put me in there.
So, going back to law, you never quite let it go.
Well, I always wanted to be a lawyer, and my major didn't matter to me really, because I just needed a degree to get into law school. Because my great granddad was a lawyer, and he had big influence on me. And so I took an accounting course from Wilton T. Anderson, who really wrote the textbook that was used around the country for, the initial course of accounting and intermediate as well. And I loved it. I just thought it was really great. So I ended up majoring in accounting. I thought I was going to major in political science or history or something like that. So I ended up getting a degree in accounting. And I never was a good accountant. I did practice a little bit when I was in law school. But when I came back as president, Wilton T. Anderson was about 90 years old. And somebody asked him if he remembered Burns Hargis. And he said, oh, yes, he was a fine student. And they told me that, and I said, thank God for dementia.
Well, Wilton T. was known to tap people on the shoulders to say, you're either an accountant or you're not an accountant.
Well, he really, it was unusual in that he was the head of the department. Yeah. And by the way, he didn't have a degree in accounting.
I didn't know that.
He had a degree in economics. I didn't either until I did his eulogy at his funeral. He had a degree in economics from Northwestern in Alva. And
wow, I didn't know that.
I don't know what his PhD, but anyhow, he was a heck of an accountant.
He was.
But he really was a giant
absolutely
in the industry. But he's passed on now, as we must all.
Indeed. So one of the questions I've been dying to ask once I knew we were going to have you on the show is, you were a student here. You've been around OSU for quite some time, impacting it and having. What was your favorite memory as a student?
Oh, I really enjoyed working in student government.
Really?
I enjoyed my fraternity. I enjoyed the social life and all that. But I had moved. They tell me I moved 21 times. I only remember about 4 because we'd move every few months. My father was he was a geophysicist. He ran seismograph crews. And so I got up here, and I'd only been in Oklahoma for 1.5 years. And I pledged Sigma Nu, and I was called in by these old guys who were probably 21, 22, and they said, we've decided you're going to run for freshman class officer. We don't know which one yet, and I said, oh, no, that's fine. I don't do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I never was in school long enough to ever do anything, really. And they said, well, you're acting like you have a choice. And I said, well, I do, don't I? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, you do. You can either do it or you can leave. And I said, well, I don't have anywhere to go. And he said, well, I guess you don't have a choice. So I ran and I won, and I got active on campus. And I think that that was my drug of choice, is
Yeah.
working to try to make things better. And I've done it. I've tried the rest of my life.
That's awesome. You know, you didn't necessarily want to do it, but you know you're good at what you do, so you just happened.
Well, yeah, I like, as I've said many times, this was really my first community.
Yeah.
I mean, I never really was a part of a community. The closest I came maybe was San Antonio, where we were actually stayed there for 3 or 4 years. But I was grade school.
Yeah.
In fact, just as an aside, one of my favorite stories is Halloween was coming up. It was my first grade, and so I came home and told Mom I had to have a costume. Well, there wasn't any Walmart or you could run out and get a Halloween costume. So she stayed up all night sewing a Felix the Cat costume. And she was just basting the tail on as the carpool came up and honked. And I said, I got to go. Just a minute. So anyway, I run down to the car and I look in and nobody has a costume on. And I turned around to Mother and she said, you get in that car. And I walked up to the front door of the grade school holding my tail and just so humiliated. And that...
a literal tail between your legs moment.
Yeah. When you go to as many new schools as I did, and your name is Vaden Burns, it isn't easy.
Yeah, I'm sure the led
It doesn't have anything to do with business school education, but it was an education.
Well, let's take us back to how did it come about you being named president?
Well, I was. It's kind of interesting, and I ran for governor in 1990 and got beat, and I was really. I really didn't want to run again. All the political guys were saying, look, Lincoln ran 6 times before he won. And I said, yeah, and he got shot. And so Frank Keating, my law school classmate, called me and said, are you going to run in 94? And I said, oh, Frank, I don't know. I really got very mixed feelings. My feelings weren't mixed, but Ann's were. She wanted to run again. And he said, well, if you don't, I'd like to. And I said, done. I'll be your campaign manager. So he then later, as governor, appointed me to the OSU Board of Regents. And I think that was in 2001. And I'd served for 5 years, and Dave Smidley left to go to University of New Mexico. And I was sitting next to Doug Burns, who's long-term time regent. And he said, you ought to look at that job. And he says, I turned to him and I said, you're crazy. You need some professional help. And anyway, it went on and on. Frank Keating had called to see if maybe he might be, interested. Called me. And I called Doug, who was the chairman of the search committee. And I said, Frank Keating called and would be interested in this job. And he said, you're still not interested? And I said, I don't know. Truthfully, if I'm honest about it, I just didn't want to lose again. I didn't want to. And so finally, I said, well, I'm really seriously thinking about it. I came home and told Ann they're talking to me about being president. And she said, of what? And so Doug said, well, look, why don't you, because the law then was you'd have to wait for a year before you could go to work for OSU if you were on the Board of Regents. And so, we're July. And he said, why don't you just go ahead and resign, and then you can get the time running. And if you decide not to run, you've gotten out of a lot of boring meetings. and so that's what I did. And then finally, and I remember in October, they called me, you got to put an application in. I mean, you can't just. So I did, and on December 7th, I was named president to be. And then the legislature in March or February passed a law to shorten that time to 6 months. So I was able to take office in March. And that was in March of 2008.
Yeah, I've talked to you in the past. You were the first president we had that wasn't an academic,
right?
And there were numbers that were kind of like, I'm not sure about this. So how did you handle that? I know I wasn't the only one that kind of had those qualms.
Oh, no. Bob, what was Bob's name? He was chairman of the faculty council.
Darcy?
No, he was my team teaching partner. I can't remember, but yeah, I thought that would be a big issue. I thought the faculty would not accept me, and that it, and you know, faculty, they're smart, and they seem to have enough time to really give you hell if they want to. And so a friend of mine, former Attorney General and federal judge Robert Henry, sent me a book called The Primer for University Presidents, written by a former president of University of Texas. And in it, he says, early in your term, you will be visited by the chair of the faculty council, and there you'll be told that faculty morale is at an all-time low. You shouldn't be too alarmed by that, because that's the highest faculty morale it ever gets. It might fall below all-time low, but it never. So, but I visited with a lot of the members of the council from the time December till I took over, and I think I convinced them that I don't think I'm an academic. I don't know anything about academics. I need a good, strong provost to take care of that, and I need to take care of running the business and raising money. And that's, you know, and I even doubted my qualifications for it. But the more I've thought about it, the more I used to think about it. I think my background was really, in many ways, very useful, both with politics and television and fundraising, and that's what I'd done for my whole career. And that's really what a president needs to be doing. The provost needs to run the academic side.
Yeah.
I think you came at the right time as kind of the president's job was shifting, right? Instead of being kind of the chief academic officer, well, they became more of an external, right? The legislature, donors, and that. So I think you came right at the right time, as that I think the role was evolving, and you know, and you're right. I mean, you were a perfect fit given your experiences for that new kind of vision of the president's rose.
Yeah, and I always had good provosts. Marlene did a great job. Gary Sandifer did a great job. Now, Bob Sternberg shook some things up.
Yeah, just a few
during his time here.
Right.
But
we might have had 100 task force going at 1 year.
He was very entertaining.
That's a good way to put it. We'll leave it at that.
He had triplets when he was 62 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about the fundraising and kind of that's a big role of the president coming in, and that's something you kind of specialized in. You actually brought in over $2 billion, which is just incredible, impressive, and kind of why OSU is where it's at today. Could you maybe talk about like how you went about that and just kind of the experiences and building OSU to what it is today?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I said, you know, I've been a regent, so I knew we needed money, and it's much more of an issue today than it was when I was at school, because the state paid for most of my education. Now it's down to about 15% that the state provides. So you've got, and you can't put all that on the backs of tuition and fees and the like, which, so I knew we needed money. I also knew we needed a win. Frankly, things have been a little controversial on campus during the previous administration. And so in the back of they said, well, we'll go out and we'll talk to all the units, all the divisions, all the colleges, see what they need, then we'll aggregate all that, and that's how we'll come up with the goal. And I said, well, you can do all that if you want to, but the goal is $1 billion. And they, what? I said, it's $1 billion because it sounds like a lot of money, and nobody would believe we can do it. And I think we can't do it. And so we didn't announce it right away. And we had a really good start because the legislature terminated, for the most part, the matching chair program where they matched endowed chairs and professorships, dollar for dollar.
Yeah.
And the legislature called both David Warren and me down to the Capitol and said, first they said we're going to stop at July of 2009, but then they decided they just do it that July. So OU had done a better job in working that program than we had, and they had about $80 million in the queue, and it was first come, first serve. We had about $12 million, and I knew I thought I needed to get $100 million in a hurry because OU wasn't going to stop raising their money. So what do you do when you need $100 million fast? You fly to Dallas and you see Boone Pickens. And he said, "Well, you got a lot of gall. You've been up there 2 months, and you're asking me for $100 million." I said, "I'm new at this."
Is that too much?
Yeah. So he agreed to do $100 million and to match other donors have that match. So if I gave $1 million, for example, I'd get the state match of $1 million. He'd match it with his $1 million, and he'd get the state match of $1 million. So $1 million became $4 million. Wow. And and we raised, as I say, 40 days and 40 nights, about $66 million. Didn't raise the whole 100, didn't get that far, but we did raise 166. And we passed OU. And David and I were in law school together as well. And we agreed that whatever we each of us had on July 1st, we'd split ratably. And that's what we did. And until 2021, the session in 2021, there was still $151 million that had not been matched. Not for just us, for everybody. And but for us was $86 million. And I went to the Capitol. It's been 13 years. Mm-hmm. I went to the Capitol and said, "Guys, I need a going away present. I'm retiring. This is my last session." And darn if they didn't do it. So they got the match. So now everything's matched, and we're off and running.
Yeah, I was surprised that.
Yeah, but people kind of caught. I give Boone a lot of credit for this because his gifts. It wasn't just that; it was $120 million for scholarships. Of course, the stadium and all that he did. But people will invest if they think it's going to happen. And I knew a lot of our alums that had a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of them believing that we really were going to do things. One of the things I wanted to do right out of the box, I couldn't believe how trashy the campus was. It really, the buildings are beautiful, and they're set back so you can appreciate them and have perspective. But the grounds were just awful. We had no sprinkler system. I mean, we had no landscape architect. I mean, they were just pulling hoses around and cutting the hedges and mowing the grass. What little there was. I mean, anywhere there was a way somebody could cut across, a student could cut across, it was dirt. That's why you see those little chains around.
That's crazy because I didn't even know that. Like that's
no sprinkler system, and the bureaucracy has a lot of defenses against change, and they didn't want to do a sprinkler system, and. But their first line of defense is maybe he'll forget about it. It's just not. The next thing they did was they put sprinklers all around Whitehurst, and I showed up and I thought, "Oh, great, we're getting it." Well, that's all the place it was. I mean, and then finally, we got to wait till we redo Farm Road and we can bring the water in from Lake Carl Blackwell. And I said, "We'll do that, but buy it from the city first." So we can get this place cleaned up. And I found a OSU grad at University of Arkansas, Steve Dobbs, that got a landscape degree here. And he gave him the budget, and the place was a show place. It's not just that I think it makes people proud. I would pick up trash everywhere I'd go. Sometimes I'd have a ball like this. I'd walk into my office and I had a really good day today. In 2009, we did away with tobacco, and that was controversial. And you all would remember it, but we had these buses, diesel buses, and Monroe had no drainage. And so there were these big kind of looked like speed bumps. But what they really were places where the water could go through, but you could walk and not get your feet wet. These diesel buses would go over those things and then accelerate, and this black smoke would just come. We were having an event over there in Human Sciences out in the garden out there. I use that term loosely in those days. And they just kept interrupting what we were doing. And he's belching all this black smoke. And so that's when Boone was doing his Pickens plan, turning vehicles into CNG powered cars. And so we had a whole fleet of CNG buses. So we got rid of that. So what you see today is and we had to. I knew we had to go to Dallas to recruit. Mm-hmm. The demographics in Oklahoma just were not going to take care of what we needed. And people, when I tried cases, I always like to create low expectations and then surprise. And that's kind of what this was for people coming up from Dallas. I don't know what they expected, a barn and a corral or what it was, but it's New Hampshire. They're just stunned. So now, I don't know lately, but we had as many as 23% that were from North Texas.
Wow.
About 33% are out of state, or were. I've lost numbers.
Yeah, I think, in our college, about 35% are out of state, and I bet about 85% of those are from North Dallas.
Yeah, well, we really made it. We even now have Pistol Pete on Texas license tags.
Yeah.
But we went down there and we put we adjusted our out-of-state tuition so it was competitive with in-state Texas tuition. A little bit more, but not bad. And that and we sent recruiters down there, and it really paid dividends because Texas had this wonderful rule called the top 10% rule. I think it's down to about 7% now. But these big high schools around Dallas you could be in the top 30% and you're a good student. And so we really had a heyday with that. Texas Tech has gained on us a lot on that score, but it all fit together. I mean, it's all pieces of the puzzle.
Well, the beautification of campus. I mean, there's actually been studies done that the number one reason why students pick a college is the way it looks.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, talking for parents of prospective students, they're just stunned at the way the campus looks. You're right. I mean, I don't know what their expectation is, sagebrush, and whatever.
Well, yeah, you'd think about it. Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma, when I was in school here, I had no idea the topography on the southwestern part of this town is like it is. I mean, when they built Karsten Creek, I was stunned. I'd been up here, all this time, and I just never seen it. So it really is a very, very pretty place. We ought to be very proud of it.
Being from Texas, all my friends, actually all my roommates that I live with are all from Texas, and we all go to OSU. And we were talking last night as we were watching some Big 12 football, but Baylor football, and we're like,
Baylor in West Virginia.
Yeah, I was like, we kind of hate all the Texas schools. And we go to Oklahoma, and we're from Texas. We hate all the Texas schools. We love OSU, and part of that, we talked about it. We're like, our campus is just better than almost every Texas school. We make fun of A&M all the time. It's just concrete. But our campus is so awesome, and we enjoy it. So, that's a big part.
There's a big fundraiser every year called the Dallas Brighter Orange, which is in at Dallas Country Club, and we'll have 400 people there. And there's lots of alums of OSU in that Dallas Metroplex.
Yeah,
I think it's amazing when you talk to them too. Is that the enthusiasm they have for OSU has the number of flags and OSU stuff they see now in the Dallas suburbs is stunning.
We come out of the closet.
Yeah. So you kind of, I know President Hallican kind of started but you really ramped it up in terms of the pride that people feel in OSU. How did you kind of achieve that to, increase more school spirit? I think
I think Boone had a lot to do with that. He talked about OSU everywhere he went. He always had an orange tie on, and he had that Pickett's plan thing going, so it was a national phenomenon. But one thing we did that I think changed the perspective of OSU, and that's the arts, the emphasis on the arts, and it because that cuts across every discipline, and we just did things that not the least of it, maybe the shining example is when we opened the McKnight Center with the New York Philharmonic. I mean, come on, out here in Stillwater, America. But we were just doing things that everything was done first class. Mike Holder and Boone Pickens get a lot of credit for that. That's the way they do. They just don't do things other than first class. And the buildings, this beautiful building, I think, changed a lot of minds. It's just I think we benefited from low expectations. I think the expectations today are much higher.
Well, but I do give you a lot of credit for helping to harness and increase that school spirit. I remember when I got here in '89, nobody wore orange.
Yeah.
Right. And people are almost, some students were even kind of embarrassed to say they went to OSU compared to OU. And to see that change so dramatically now, it's stunning, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I used to, if I'd go to a game in Norman, I'd walk in there and, what's an Aggie doing here? And I said, unlike a lot of people in this stadium, I actually have a degree from OU.
Yeah, a lot of OU fans just went to Walmart.
Yeah.
Sorry,
That's incredible.
That's one of the things that people are surprised. I don't think they even believe me when I tell them. But my attitude and David's attitude is we're the only friends we have in higher education in Oklahoma. Everybody else wants what we have. So if we fight, then they win. So we've stood in lockstep together, right? The only time I remember David objecting to a proposed course we were going to, it was in nursing, and he swears to me he didn't really do it. He said that they did it over at OU Tulsa, and but we just didn't do it. I mean, I'd get requests to complain about or try to block OU getting something. No. If they can, I believe in competition. If they can do it, let them do it. But we really, really did try to stay in lockstep. And even when Joe Harris became president, who I'd known for 40 years, he was with David when David was in the Senate and so on. And for example, when he and I talked in those couple of months, early months in 20, about coming back after spring break. And we agreed, first of all, we had to do the same thing. We couldn't one do something and another. And so we agreed that it was best that we not bring students back after spring break, and because everybody goes to the Four Winds and who knows what you bring back. And it really, we met with the governor just so he'd give him a heads up. And he said, well, you can't do that. And I said, well, we can do that. And that's what we're going to do. I just wanted, it's going to create panic. And well, maybe, but we're not going to have a bunch of COVID cases on campus. And the faculty, and you know better than I can, but the faculty pivoted incredibly well. Yeah. So did the students. I mean, it really worked.
Well, and it was the right call. I mean, I think that it made everyone feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of uncertainty then.
Then we spent the whole summer trying to figure out if we're going to play football or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was on the board of the NCAA as well as the Big 12 board. When the NCAA canceled March Madness, it was a $570 million decision.
Wow. It
turned out that they had business interruption insurance for about $230 million, and they did get that. But the big issue all summer was, do we play football? Because as somebody said, it's like working in a meat market. Yeah. I mean, it's just, and in fact, we had a meeting of doctors. There were KU doctors and a doctor from Mayo Clinic, because while the athletes probably, even if they got COVID, were not going to have serious repercussions. There was something about myocardia that if a student had COVID and had certain heart conditions, that could cause a real problem. Although the guy from Mayo Clinic said, well, I have over 3,000 myocardial patients, and I don't think it's going to be a problem. And so we played. So that would have been a real lick to miss the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they did a great job over there. We didn't. The only game we missed was Tulsa, and that's because they had to go.
That's right. Yeah.
You handle a ton of big things here, like COVID. Another one of those big things, at least in my perspective, was hiring Dean Eastman during your time as president. Can you maybe talk about just maybe your favorite memory or some of the experiences along with Dean Eastman?
It was interesting because we asked Ken to be the interim. Mm-hmm. And Dean. And the general rule is that if you're the interim, you're not a candidate. because it chills other people applying for the job because they think it's an inside deal. And I think Ken understood it.
Yep.
Take that. You're not going to be the dean. And in the course of all that, I came across Linda Livingstone, who was at Pepperdine at the time. Her parents lived in Perkins, and she had she'd got all three of her degrees here in business, and so I thought she was a good possibility. But Ken had so romanced all these people around here. And we had a lot of deans. I mean, we had a lot of
There was a lot of
turmoil in
churn
deans.
before.
Yeah, a lot of churn. And everybody really was pleased and happy about Ken's leadership. And I just felt like, well, I mean, the rules are made to be broken. Let's break this rule. And it's all worked out really well. Linda went on. She went to Georgetown and then, of course, became president of Baylor.
She landed on her feet.
Oh, yeah.
So I know some people have heard the tie story.
Oh, yeah.
But if you would,
when this was going on, I saw. I told, maybe it was Jay Helm. I don't know who some regent, but I made just some crack about, I just don't know if I can take anybody serious that wears a bow tie. And so there was an energy conference in Oklahoma City, and Ken had a regular tie on, and I said, what do you wear? Why are you wearing a big boy tie? And he said, I'm not taking any chances.
Yeah. I had an alum said, "How married are you to the bow tie?" I go, "What do you mean? Burns doesn't like them." I said,
"Actually, I had one on last night."
And I said, "Well, if the only thing standing between me and being dean is a tie. It's gone. I mean, I'll ditch it." But yeah.
No, I put on. I went to a big Broadway bash last night, and I wore a bow tie. They're festive.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Now people.
Yeah. Now it's only pediatricians and maitre d's.
When I retire, I'll move right into one of those here, so it won't be a problem. Looking back, what was maybe one of the more unusual decisions you had to make?
Well, and I use this in leadership talks. It was when at the homecoming parade, when we had the tragedy, Ann and I were toward the front of the parade, so we were already home. We'd had breakfast, and we were just sitting there reading the paper. We were going to play Kansas, and our phones just blew up with that woman that drove into the crowd. And so the immediate question was, do we play the game? Now it's 10:30 or 11. I can't remember the kickoff time, but so you didn't have any time, and that's what I assume people, if they don't learn it in college, they learn it soon enough in leadership roles, is that you're constantly having to make decisions without all the information. You just can't. You can't. And academia is different than that. They don't publish a paper till they're sure.
Yeah.
And you just don't have that luxury in the real world. Not that this is not the real world. And so we had a meeting over in my office, and everybody expressed their opinion. But sooner or later, they all looked down at the end of the table, and I talked to Gundy. He said, "Whatever you decide, just let me know." And I just decided, there's something about staying together and not going to the four winds, and I just thought it would be almost therapeutic for us to be together. Show proper respect. Go, they did a prayer before the game, and Kansas was very cooperative about it all. I had just had hip replacement, and I was on a cane. And we went down to the police station for the press conference, and we're standing inside. Press conference is outside, and so they said, "Okay, we're ready to go." Well, I handed Ann my cane, and she said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I don't want people to think I got hurt. I mean, So glad I didn't topple over on the thing. But that's an example of a tough decision and not much time to do it. And I only got 2 critical emails about that, and they both came from California.
Really?
I don't think they had any connection with OSU or not. I never heard a word. There were plenty of things about which I did hear a lot of words, but not that one. So but there were a lot of those things come up, 2 or 3 times a day, and you got to make calls, and and sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes when the issue of Murray Hall was would bubble up usually Bob Darcy stirred it up. And, Alfalfa Bill Murray was a racist and anti-Semitic and all that stuff. And he really was not a good guy in that respect. But he was governor and put the money up. That was Murray Hall, now Randolph Hall, Davis Hall, I guess, it was a women's dormitory. And supposedly it was the biggest women's dormitory in the country when it was built. And Murray was not a fan of OSU, even though he was from Tishomingo, and but I'm sure, I don't know this to be a fact, but I'm sure that the deal was, we'll put your name on the building, and so that would bubble up every now and then. So they get the students riled up about it, and then if I could just make it to summer. Then it would die out for a day, for a year or two, and then it'd come back. And it wasn't that I'm a Murray fan. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to have to replace the limestone. I thought most people don't even know who Murray is. And finally, the SGA passed a almost unanimous resolution that we take the name off. And I'm in my last year. And I asked Gary Clark, my general counsel, to do an unnaming policy. We have a naming policy, but to do an unnaming policy, and it should be hard to take a name off. I mean, if somebody's, and he did. Well, everybody jumped through every hoop, and so I called the chair of the Board of Regents and I said, I'm not falling on my sword on this deal.
Yeah,
it's coming to you, and they passed it unanimously, and then put fittingly Nancy Randolph Davis, our first African American graduate, on the building.
And so 2 big things, kind of to land this plane. 2 big things. Kind of at the end of your career for you is, one, you just got a bronze statue on campus, which is absolutely awesome, and you're being inducted into the Spears Hall of Fame. Can you kind of talk about those 2 experiences? Did they have you pose for the statue, or how exciting are both those things?
Well, that whole thing was awkward. The regents, they're the ones that cooked this thing up. I didn't go say I want a statue, and they said that's what they want to do. And I thought it was too soon. I thought, that's great. It's very high honor, but, give Casey a little time to settle in here before she has to look at my mug. And they just wanted to move forward on it. And I just thought it was, I don't know. I still think it was too soon. And but in any event, Mike Larson is a very noted sculptor who actually lives outside of Perkins studio, and he's done a lot of beautiful stuff. And I knew him, and I didn't know the others we were talking to. And the only other one, by the way, was in Norman, and that was a little awkward. And of course, H. Holden over in Enid is a wonderful sculptor, but he was working on Frank Eaton in the middle of all that. So the way it works is they take a bunch of pictures of you, and from a lot of different angles. And one of the interesting little sidebar on this thing was the pose that you're having. Henry Bennett's got a book, kind of a pedestal thing in a book, and they had me with a scroll, Moses or something, and I think I'm the one that actually came up with it. But if I'm just standing around, I always stand like this. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's just comfortable to me, rather. And anyway, we decided. I can't remember exactly how it all played out, but we decided to do that. That would give it a little energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then where do you look? Do I look at Bennett or? And to me, it looks like I'm going, what are they doing over there?
Which is a believable thing.
yeah, because they took trees down around here at night, so I didn't see it. I mean, it just, I'd say, what's wrong with this tree? And they said, well, it's sick. Well, you always say they're sick. You'd be sick too if I put a chainsaw to you. So it's a phenomenal honor, and I'm embarrassed a little bit about it, and almost none of our friends had any clue that it was going to happen. And we spent most of the summer in Taos, New Mexico, and we just came back for the day for that, and it was really hot.
Yeah, man, I felt sorry. You guys were baking out there,
but it's big. And then the Spears Hall of Fame is great. I mean, I bet I've gone to 10 or 15 of these, where we've honored other people. It's kind of cathartic in one way and nostalgic in another, because they always want 50 pictures, and they want them of your childhood all the way. They want people to be interviewed, and it's not like you just get to walk up there and everybody showers you. You got a lot of work to do. And but no, that's a great honor too. I'm very,
for sure,
very proud of that.
Yeah, I think people might be surprised, even though you've been on TV and all this stuff, you're actually pretty humble. You don't like drawing attention to yourself. When I called you to invite you in the Hall of Fame, I was all prepared to have to argue with you, because I knew your natural inclination is no, somebody else.
Call somebody with money.
Yeah, that's right. I had a whole list of arguments I was going to have to try to go through. I was going to list and if I had to, but so I appreciate you making it a little more easy on me than I was afraid of.
No, it's a very nice honor, and I'm pleased to go in with Jay Helm, who's one of my best friends, and also one of the thorniest burrs under my saddle blanket.
I think it was appropriate, the two of you going in together.
Yeah.
Well, Dalton, you got a last question?
I think we knocked the last question out of the way with that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Former President. I won't say X anymore. It's been a delight to talk with you again and hear some of the stories. And again, to you all out there, thanks for listening to The Buzz on Business. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media at Spears Business OSU. If you or someone you know have an interesting business story or industry insight, send us a DM. Until next time, this is The Buzz on Business.